Hi, this is Joe again with another movie review. And for this video, we're going to be discussing the 1974 thriller, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. I know there's been a couple remakes. One was a TV movie, another one was a 2009 theatrical remake with John Travolta and Denzel Washington. But if I have time, I get to those remakes. Well, at least the 2009 remake. But I'm mostly going to focus on the 1974 original because and this has a hell of a cast. The original one, excuse me, the original one had was starring Walter Matthau, Jerry Stiller. It also has Robert Shaw, Hector Elizondo, Lauren Blossom, and in the original version. Now the original one, like I said, it came out in 1974, and it has a time when you had realistic style movies, and this is one of them. The premise of this film is there's four guys, and the core name is Mr. Blue, Mr. Gray, Mr. Green, and Mr. Brown. That's your old colors, and then use the real names, and you won't know the real names until they bring in the film. Uh, and these four guys decide to hijack a number 6 subway train in New York City. And the reason why the title is Pelham 123, and I do explain that in the beginning of the film. Uh, because each subway line, there's various subway lines in New York City. Some of them are more famous than others, like the A train and the B train, and the C train, and the D train. Uh, each line starts and ends at different points along the New York City subway system. And the reason why it's called Pelham 123 is because that's where the number 6 train starts. It starts in the Pelham section of the Bronx, and the time was 1:23 p.m. That's when the route starts. So that's why throughout the film it's called Pelham 123, because that's where its route started from was Pelham, which was the last stop on the 6th train, or the first stop, depending on which direction you're coming from. It's actually the first stop on the 6th train, coming from the Bronx to downtown Manhattan. And the time was 1:23 p.m. That's when it starts. So it's called Pelham 123 for that reason. And these four guys take over hijack this train, and they separate this one particular car from the rest of the train. And they hijack it, and they demanded that the city of New York pay them $1 million. And if not, and then the money is late, they kill one passenger for every minute that the train is late, or the money demand is late. And the one who did most of the talking was Robert Shaw. He was like considered the main bad guy, but he really isn't. He's like a MacGuffin device. Um, the guy who originally had the idea was Morgan Blossom. I know, spoiler, was Morgan Blossom's character, who was the one who actually engineered this whole idea. But Robert Shaw was the one who executed it. It was like a guy for hire. And Hector Elizondo was also one of the four guys. I forgot who played the fourth guy. Uh, and Walter Matthau played the New York City uh, cop, the transit cop. Now there was a time in 1974. There were like two separate police forces in New York City. One was the main NYPD, and for the people who were the police force for the subway system, were transit cops. Now, in the early mid '90s, uh, under Mayor Giuliani, they merged the police, the main NYPD with the transit police. I think it was like about 96, 97, something like that. And it was like in the late '90s, they merged the two departments into one whole big unit. By that time, they had separate police forces. And Walter Matthau was the cop in charge. First, he was taking a tour group of Japanese tourists around the MTA headquarters, and then when this call came in, he took over and was negotiating with the uh, hijackers, and then eventually figured out who the fourth hijacker was, which had to be Warren Blossom's character. And of course, this had a real classic ending in this movie, um, because Warren Blossom's character was sneezing through the whole film. And of course, when we figured out there were about 9 guys who had been fired, who were worked for the MTA in the subways, because the other 3 guys, according to the terms that were negotiating with them, hey, these guys are very, very smart guys, but they know how to operate a train, and because they got eventually got the dossiers or the records of the three guys, and found out one of them had experience riding a train before, so they figured out, hey, maybe he's the guy who had a grudge, got fired or something. So they ran the recent record for the last, let's say, year of guys who have been fired by the MTA, and they figured out there's 9 guys who are unaccounted for. Because some of them have been rehired, some of them died, uh, some of them got other jobs, um, a couple of them went to jail or whatever. And it was like 9 guys who weren't accounted for, like I said. So they figured out who there's one guy, and they went to each and one of the 9 guys' homes, apartments, houses, whatever, uh, to ask him, hey, do you know anything about this hijacking stuff? So they eventually get to more block. So Jamie, after all the hijacking stuff, which I'm not going to give away how the hijacking thing turns out, in case some of you haven't seen the movie. Um, but it's like relatively the same idea in the remake, in the 2009 remake. They didn't get the money, and then they all separated, and all of them had two of them got shot. One of them by a cop who was actually on the subway train. And Robert Shaw's character electrocuted himself in the third rail because he knew he was going to get captured. Didn't want to be captured, so he actually electrocuted himself in the third rail. And the fourth guy, Hagman Alexander's character, was the one that got shot first. Then this other guy, the fourth guy, got shot by the cops. And Robert Shaw, like I said, twice a day, he electrocuted himself, so they had to look for this fourth guy. And the fourth guy happened to be, of course, the guy who knew trains, how they work. Uh, the braking system is when the subway system that works on the subways in case something goes wrong. All that stuff gets explained to the viewer. If you watch the viewer, it explains how this guy knows every detail. So, how come the light? They cut the power, but the lights won't still on. So my show goes, how come the lights are still on? He said, well, that's because it's an emergency lights. They always go on if the power gets cut off. It's for emergency purposes only. So this fourth guy, Warren Blossom's character, knows everything about the transit system, and he always sneezing through the whole film. So when Robert Shaw talks to Walter Matthau's character, Warren Blossom's character all of a sudden starts sneezing. And he says Gesundheit, because he had a code or science or analogy, whatever it is, he's always sneezing. So when Walter Matthau and Jeremy Stiller get to Warren Blossom's house, they ask him a couple of questions, and Warren Blossom eventually kicks him out and said, look, I don't owe you guys anything anymore, I don't work for you anymore, get the hell out of my house. And then on the way out, we're closing the door, and all of a sudden goes, he sneezes, and the man goes tight, and the door says, gotcha. Even though he never actually says gotcha. But he opens the door and gives him a look, says, like, busted. And that's how the original movie ended. Well, I know there was a remake, or a TV remake, I think in like 97, 98. I haven't seen the original version. I only saw the 2009 remake with John Travolta and Denzel Washington. And the problem I have with the remake is that it was not accurate with how the line works in terms of what the stops. But the original movie, it was accurate with how the stops work because it did show 51st Street. Anybody who knows the number 6 line in New York City, the stops that were featured in the film was 51st Street and Lexington Avenue. Then you have Grand Central. Then you have 33rd Street and then 28th Street. And those were the prominent stops. And The next stop afterward was 14th Street, Union Square. So those stops were prominently featured in this film. Um, but in the remake, 2009 remake, it was, it wasn't Tony Scott, Michael Scott, I think, was directed the movie. Brother Tony Scott directed this film, and he used almost every inch of the subway system. They even used my area, Woodside, 61st Street, Woodside. You see Woodside in the film when trying to get the money to the hijackers. You see Roosevelt Avenue and the Stop and Diner, which is right on the corner of 61st Street and Woodside. You know, plug for them. If you blink, you miss the diner. Plus other areas of Woodside where Denzel Washington's character lives. Um, but it had more like one part like it's like John Travolta's character was really the guy in charge, and Robert Shaw, even though he was the guy in charge, it was really Warren Blossom was the one who came up with this idea of the train and hijacking the train and getting the money from the city. This whole thing was John Travolta's show. He stole every scene he was in, and the remake was not as good as the original. The original film was much better, and of course, it's more accurate with that particular subway line than the remake was. Of course, if you also look at the remake, there's this particular sequence where the hijackers leave the train, and the train speeds up. They let it run without anybody on board, and it gets going faster and faster, and then eventually it stops with the automatic braking, or called the dead man's braking system. In case of the motorman, decides to have a heart attack or dies suddenly, or has a stroke and dies right then and there, and the train speeds up. As soon as the train hits a red light on the track, it automatically stops. The braking system hits, and the train stops almost dead stops right there. Um, During that particular sequence in the remake, the train goes by Shea Stadium. Of course, at that time when the remake came out, no more Shea Stadium. So that was a bit of a discontinuity, messed up the continuity system with the continuity. With the subway system, because sort of almost every inch of the New York. I mean, they use the entire New York City system, at least almost. And where the hijackers escaped in the original movie was in the 14th Street Union Square area. You actually do see the Union Square Park in the original film. In the remake, John Travolta was like walking across like I think it was like the Manhattan Bridge. In the remake, and they had a final showdown between Denzel Washington and John Travolta, and Denzel Washington shoots him right there on the bridge. I mean, that was it. But also in the remake, you also have Tony Soprano, James Gandolfini playing the mayor in the remake. In the original film, I don't know who the actor was who played the mayor in the film, but he looks just like was soon to be mayor, Ed Koch. Even though Ed Koch wouldn't become mayor until wouldn't be elected mayor until like 3 years later, 1977. But in 1974, you had a guy who looks just like Ed Koch. Or former mayor Ed Koch. But at the time the movie was soon to be mayor, because it was like 3 years before Ed Koch was elected mayor for the first time in 1977. So it was kind of funny because when I saw the movie for the first time 6 years ago, I said that guy looks just like Ed Koch. Same thing with the original Batman movie, because the guy who played the mayor of Gotham City in the very first 1989 Batman film also looked like Ed Koch, and they got a big laugh from the audience. Hey, that guy looks like Ed Koch. How did Ed Koch get in this thing? Um, but I think the original film was much better because the actors were much better. In the remake, you only have 3 good actors in the whole movie. James Gandolfini, you had Denzel Washington, and John Travolta, and that's it. In the remake, you have Robert Shaw, Hector Elizondo, you had Warren Blossom, you had Walter Matthau, you had Jerry Stiller, and also for you Home Improvement fans out there, those of you who are fans of the television Tim Allen show Home Improvement, the guy who played Mr. Leonard on Home Improvement also appears in this movie. Um, and he had a pretty. He had more than a few lines in the movie. The guy who played Tim Allen's shop teacher in Tim Allen's television series Home Improvement appeared in this movie as well. Um, so all these actors were held up better. It was a much better film. It was more of a tighter script, more um, more accurate with the subway system, and I like how the original one ended. It's better than the remake. I say if you want to see both versions, I suggest you see the original one first, the 1974 version, and then check out the remake and see and prove me wrong. Because the remake I mean, it's alright. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's a great movie. It's good, and and it has the basic plot involved, but it was mostly John Travolta and Denzel Washington showing this thing, and I think it's not as good because he did have other characters who had their own little moments in this film. All the other actors in the original movie had their own little moments in the sun in that one. Not in the remake. In the remake, was just John Travolta and Denzel Washington butting heads in this thing. And I think both of them pretty much have fun with those characters, particularly John Travolta. It was like really over the top, cursing like a drunken sailor. There was more f bombs in the remake than was actually in the original because you could f bomb you could push the cursing more in the remake than you did in 1974. I'm not saying there was any cursing in the original one. It's just that it was like more over the top cursing in the remake. There was more motherfuckers. Excuse my language. There's more motherfuckers in the remake than there was in the original. But but I appreciate the original movie. The original movie was much better. The theme music was much better. The tension was better uh, in the original than it was in the remake. Uh, in the remake, because I knew what was going to happen in the remake because I saw the original one like the night before or the week before I came out, and so I happened to see the original on television, and I felt the original one was better. Cause I went to see him, and I goes, "Hey, how was the remake?" And he said the original one was better, and he says, "Oh, you think so?" I said, "Yeah." Because I like the actors more in the original than I do in the remake. I'm not liking John Travolta or Denzel Washington, they're fine actors. But I like the original one better because they have more quality actors than just two guys. In a movie like this, you gotta have just more than two guys. You have his henchmen, have their own scenes, like in the remake, and like in the original, each one of the henchmen had a scene. You have the cop, the cop on the thing had his own scene, and all that other stuff, and the other MTA workers had their own scenes as well. Not so much in the remake, just the two guys. So that's my review of the Taking of Phelam 123. Please click on the video, please rate it. Feel free to comment on it. Please subscribe to my channel, and please forward this video onto your Facebook pages. Also, you can check out some of my older videos. You can check out all my videos on my YouTube channel. You can check out most of my other older reviews on rowdyc.com. That's ROWDY.com. You can also check out the Rowdy Reviewers site. You can check out his content as well. He just finished the fall spring season, the 2014-2015 season of his TV trash reviews. Check his stuff out as well as the other content on his on rowdyc.com, and you can check out all my previous reviews. You also can check out my other videos I posted, the old reviews. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time.